Tanya hugged her younger son tighter. The older boy and girl fell silent on either side of the mother. They did not fully understand what was happening, but the unconscious experience of the woman was transmitted to the kids. All three have been sitting on a bench in the park for several hours. "Mom, I want to eat." The daughter gently tugged at Tanya's sleeve. This brought her out of a strange trance. She looked at the children, then looked at the backpack and 2 bags of things. The throat was desperately squeezed, and the eyes stinged. Tanya hastily took a few breaths and blinked rapidly so as not to frighten the kids. But emotions, successfully hammered somewhere far away, demanded an outlet. The woman sobbed, a tear rolled down her cheek. "Mom, what are you?" the eldest son asked in fear. And then Tanya broke through. She howled deafly from hopelessness. The younger son, like an Uzbek, slipped out of his hands and stood right in front of his mother. The woman immediately twisted, she hugged her knees, swayed and began to sob, no longer noticing anything around. Children with fear watched the hysteria of the mother. They did not understand what was happening, but they felt that their loved one felt bad. The eldest son put a small hand on the woman's shoulder and began to stroke her back. Tanya shuddered from sobs, and he frightenedly removed his hand. The younger one could not stand it first, he softly sobbed and then sobbed loudly. The brother pulled him to him, hugging him tightly. His daughter picked up the baton after him. The older one held on with the last of his strength to furtively sniffing and wiping his eyes. Practically no one paid attention to a strange family. Passers-by threw indifferent glances and went on about their business. No one even thought to ask what happened to them. You never know why children are hysterical. Directly on the ground under a tree, not far from the family, a dirty bum was sitting. He slowly sorted through his belongings in the demolition backpack and periodically cast glances at the children. The man noticed them immediately. As soon as the mother took the kids to the park, they looked around in confusion, as if they did not understand where they were. The bum didn't like to interfere in other people's business. Life has already once taught him a lesson for excessive kindness. He went away in search of food. The bakery workers gave him a whole bag of stale croissants. Thanking him, he returned to the park. To his surprise, the woman with the children was still sitting on the bench. Only now all 4 were sobbing. The homeless always did not tolerate other people's tears. Even now I could not calmly look at the heartbreaking sight and came closer. "Excuse me, do you need help?" he asked. Tanya raised her tear-stained eyes. Who had spoken? Overgrown, dirty, in torn clothes. Oh yes, this is just the one who can help. An ironic thought flashed through the woman's head. Suddenly she saw herself from the side. Completely alone with 3 children, and the only one who cared about them was a shaggy, smelly bum. Tanya was suddenly overwhelmed with indefatigable merriment. She burst out laughing out loud, hugging herself with her arms. She kept laughing and laughing, slipping into a new hysteria. The homeless man took a few steps back in surprise, but the bewildered look of the children did not let him leave completely. They no longer cried, but sobbed with fear, looking at their mother. "Uncle, I want to eat," the girl suddenly drawled. The little girl looked about 3 years old. She was a completely charming child, and even the dried tears did not spoil her cute face. She looked with such greed at the package of pastries in the hands of a man that it turned out that she was about to pounce on him. Noticing the same hungry gleam in the eyes of the boys, the bum hurriedly handed the children croissants. "They're stale but delicious," Anthony said. "Just from the bakery, don't you think? I didn't pull them out of the trash can, the baker gave them to me. They are clean, honestly." The woman watched in a huff as the children greedily devoured the treat. In a matter of minutes, they ate the whole package, and there is hope, and looked at the man. The homeless man spread his hands in regret. "Thank you," Tanya squeezed out quietly. "Are you all right?" The man asked doubtfully. She opened her mouth to get rid of the obsessive attention. Either the hysteria did not completely let go, or she just needed to speak out, but the woman suffered. She found herself telling a complete stranger about her life. Cheered up with food, the children played with small pebbles from the path nearby. The bum sat down on a bench nearby and listened silently. Tanya spent her childhood in an orphanage. Her grandfather occasionally came to her. The only living relative. He would have been glad to take his granddaughter, but he was very old and could not provide for the child. When she was 10 years old, her grandfather visited her for the last time. A little later, she was informed that the old man's heart could not stand it. But her grandfather left her a house as a legacy. I had to go far from the city to a remote village. The house looked very tiny and dilapidated. There was such tall grass around that it was not clear where the site ended. The keys to the house were nowhere to be seen. The neighbors also did not know where they might be. Yes, and Tanya did not think that there was something worthwhile inside, so she calmly returned to the city. She entered a technical school on a privilege, studied to be a cook, and worked as a waitress in a cafe. In her last years, she was even taken to the kitchen in a seasonal restaurant. But she did not manage to work at a permanent place. Tanya met a wonderful guy who brought fresh food to the restaurant every day. They started dating, then the girl suddenly became pregnant. Tanya did not expect a miracle. But the guy agreed to sign. The bride moved into an apartment with her future husband. In everyday life, he was not as perfect as he looked on dates, but the girl was ready to turn a blind eye to this. She firmly believed that she could build a happy family. However, the appendage to the guy left his entire large family, which at first sight disliked Tatiana. The mother grimaced contemptuously, the sister shied away as if from a leper, the father, although he observed neutrality, did not favor his daughter-in-law. Signed quietly without guests and relatives. This caused a storm of indignation among the husband's family, but he sharply responded. They wanted a daughter-in-law and grandchildren, you get it, and I don't need to sore my brain anymore. Tanya was unpleasantly scratched by this situation, but she did not want to get into a pose to make scandals, so she silently swallowed the insult. The girl worked to the last, washing dishes with a huge belly. It was hard for her, but she did not have to wait for help from newly acquired relatives. They were not interested in the life of the daughter-in-law at all. For some reason, Tanya was sure that something would change with the birth of her son. She gave birth to Slavik herself. She also traveled home from the hospital alone. The husband did not deign to meet his firstborn and treated the child rather coldly. The life of the girl became even harder. In addition to care, the baby also demanded money, not the banknotes themselves, of course, but diapers, clothes, food and hundreds of other non-obvious little things. The husband worked at the same job and received a little, he was frankly too lazy to change something. And he could eat with his mother if his wife did not cook. Tanya could not go to work. There was no one to leave the child with, a colleague with whom they had previously worked helped. I began to throw orders for homemade cakes for the holidays. Nothing complicated, muffins with cream filling, cookies, fragrant shortbread pies. Tanya made everything tasty and easy, and there was food in the house. And most importantly, money. As soon as the son began to sleep normally the whole night, the husband remembered his marital debt, and soon the girl discovered that she was pregnant again. At the birth of Nastia, history repeated itself. The husband did not come to the maternity hospital, but at least the mother-in-law agreed to accept the eldest son for 3 days. The husband's parents did not feel tenderness about the grandchildren who appeared, they did not invite them to visit, they did not go themselves. From some side it was good, they did not climb with advice, but there was nowhere to wait for help. Tanya continued to work part-time at home while managing 2 children. The husband did not try to find a better job, he generally lived as if nothing had changed in his life. In the evenings he often disappeared with friends in bars, he didn't deny himself anything, and if he didn't have enough money, he went to his mother. Tanya began to get annoyed by this. Nastia was already 2 years old, and Slavik went to kindergarten. A woman has more time to work and meager savings. She began to think about divorce, but to her horror she found that she was pregnant again. Leaving in position was risky, and Tanya stayed behind. David was a wonderful baby, but very loud, he fell silent only in his sleep, which irritated his father incredibly. Tanya was very surprised when her husband said that he wanted to go to work abroad. The road needed money, which he did not have. The woman was seduced by beautiful stories about a brighter future and gave everything that she had accumulated with such difficulty. The husband left. Tanya, to her shame, was relieved. She took care of the children, again began to take small orders at home. One thing upset her, her husband very rarely called, and then completely disappeared for 2 months. The woman panicked in earnest, even gathered her courage to go to her mother-in-law, but she was ahead of her. She came early in the morning, when the children were still at home, and said that her son was getting married. She accused Tanya of giving birth to it is not clear from whom. She said that she always hated her. Tanya was so shocked that without talking she signed the slipped documents for divorce, and then her mother-in-law turned into a fury. She began to drive her ex-daughter-in-law with the children out into the street. She allowed me to take a few things with her and pushed her out onto the landing. So Tanya ended up in the middle of the park. I don't know what to do. Tears flowed from her eyes again. The homeless man sat in shock, he did not expect to hear such a story and now he could not leave and forget what he had heard. For a while he thought and offered. You have a grandfather's house, you return there, if you want, I will go with you, I will help you physically at first, anyway, I have nothing to do in the city, and then I will leave as soon as you get on your feet. Tanya didn't know what made her agree, probably, she was just very scared alone. And with the support of an unfamiliar dirty man, but as tired as, calmer and easier. We arrived at dusk, made our way through the tall thickets, the man broke the lock and settled down to spend the night on dusty beds. In the morning, Tanya and the children went to meet the neighbors, and the homeless man, whose name was George, set to work. Broke through the path from the rickety gate to the house, well, and toilet. Fortunately, the well did not dry up and they were provided with water. All day, tidying up the house. While the children were playing in the yard. By evening, the dust and musty smell had disappeared from the room. George found a large basin where the children happily bathed. And then, embarrassed, the homeless man asked for clothes from his grandfather's closet, took scissors and disappeared into the street. When the man returned, he was simply unrecognizable. His beard and hair were cut crooked, but George was clean and well-groomed, albeit in old clothes. It turned out that he was a rather young man, he helped in every possible way in the family. Already on the second day I went to the neighbors offering to work for food. Ruled the fences, and patched the roofs, chopped wood in the shed and regularly brought Tanya food, and sometimes even money. Once a week George went to the city. Tanya did not ask what he was doing there, but the man always returned with gifts. He brought things for her and the children, the toys were not new, but the family was glad about this. Neighbors soon found out about Tanya's culinary talent. They ordered bread and pastries from her. Their family was treated well. True, they thought that George and the father of Tanya's children, but the woman was in no hurry to dissuade them. Let it be better than being whispered behind your back. Slowly but surely, the dilapidated shack began to look like a house. Georgie removed the thickets around, straightened the fence, made a barn, and repaired the cellar in the yard. To the joy of the children, chickens and dogs appeared. By the winter, the man collected a full barn of firewood, and Tanya actively helped elderly neighbors with conservation. Several jars for them, one for myself, and stocked up for the winter. Tanya no longer imagined how she would have survived without George, and he enjoyed taking care of the children and worked a lot on the housework. In the spring, he helped to plant a vegetable garden, and then he suddenly got busy. "I promised that I would help you get on your feet," he said. "The house is in order, there is food, it will be harvested in the fall. It's time for me to return." "Where?" Tanya asked in a hoarse voice. "Outside." George shrugged. "I was already delayed, the children became attached to me, it will be more difficult for me to say goodbye to them further." "Don't leave." Blushing, whispered Tanya. "We need you, I need you." 5 years later, a happy family was walking in the central park of the city. The man ran with 3 laughing children in a race. The woman watched them with a smile, pushing the stroller in front of her. For a moment, her eyes rested on the surprised woman. The former mother-in-law eagerly looked at Tanya. She did not expect to see a happy blooming daughter-in-law, who obviously had everything in her life well. She even gritted her teeth in anger. The new wife of her adored son sued him for an apartment and left him with nothing. The mother-in-law was already about to say something poisonous in order to vent her anger, but as soon as she approached Tanya, George appeared next to her. Under his formidable gaze, she faded away and moved away. "Who is this?" The man frowned. "And this is a nightmare." Tanya brushed aside from her past life.